residue on all things Tom Brady and their victory in the New England Patriots, but I'm also trying to catch up with some folks that I didn't get on the program last week on Radio Row there at the Convention Center. This guy and I had an adult beverage along with some Pittsburgh sports writers that don't tell anybody, but I like those guys. This guy was a longtime trainer and on the sidelines as an orthopedist with the San Diego Chargers. You may have heard him on Sirius XM as well as at Real Football TV, and you certainly can follow his work, and thousands do, tens of thousands do, at Pro Football Doc out on Twitter. He is Dr. David J. Chow. We welcome him onto the program for the very first time. Dude, I've been following you for a long time, man. I mean, you provide a hell of a service in games. I don't know how many guys who do what you do it, but your work certainly comes highly recommended, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I know a lot of people tell me, I don't know why you're giving it away for free, but it's just a hobby and something I've been doing, and certainly Sirius has been good to me and some of the other outlets, but it's something I enjoy doing, and I call it the medical Mike Pereira. I mean, I love what Mike Pereira does for refereeing and rules, and I'm trying to do a similar thing related to medical status, injuries, and protocols.
Having seen concussion and having been on sidelines for 21 years, most of my adult life, and seeing football players come back from all sorts of heinous, horrific injuries, and I know you've been in that space and you clearly love the game as well. What's the number one misconception about the medical side of this thing? And maybe more than that, how much have things changed from 20 years ago when you were on the sidelines to now in regard to how just relationships between the head coach and the trainer? I mean, I think there was a popular notion that 25 years ago that a guy like you would shoot anything into anybody and stick him back on the field, because I think that's the way it's been portrayed. If you didn't play, you got thrown off the team in the old days.
Yeah, it's the biggest misconception is this is not like the movies. This is not North Dallas 40 or whatever reincarnation of football movie there is. And I've been asked a lot of times about forcing guys back to play, this, that, and the other. Let me tell you who forced me, who wanted to influence me to get players back to play. It wasn't owners, it wasn't GMs, it wasn't head coaches. It was the players themselves that lobbied, hey, get me back, do what you can, etc. That's where the pressure came from. Didn't come from the team or the staffs. It came from the players themselves.
Well, and in that case, I mean, you had to be the stop sign, right? I mean, I think the medical trainers, I mean, they're not focused on, no one knows Andy Tucker's name or Leanne Curl with the Ravens. I know what they look like. I don't talk to them a whole lot because there's not a whole lot they can say, with HIPAA and all the privacy issues. But, I think it's a very difficult job. And I think the relationships between teams and medical organizations are also very difficult, and made even more difficult now by how in on it the public thinks they are in regard to head trauma and concussions, and when a guy gets dinged, whether they take his helmet away or whether they let him go out there and run around. And I know the Players Association took big umbrage with that last week in Houston.
Yeah, well, you just talked about a lot of things there, and I could probably talk for an hour just in responding to that question.
Well, good. Let's do it. Like we do radio here.
Yeah, but in terms of the people thinking they know what it is. One of the problems is that the medical side is very complicated, and because once you're a medical professional, you're not allowed to talk, and you never get out the other side of the story. So the public and the reporters, and perhaps even medical professionals who are not in the league, establish the narrative, and those inside the league are never able to correct it, because you can't really leak sources or get out your side of the story. One of the things I've been saying for a long time is that the NFL should allow at least the UNC, the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant, to speak after a game to a pool reporter. The referee does it, so if there's a controversial call, the referee can at least explain what he and or his crew were thinking. I think the same thing would help the public understand a little bit what players went through. Let's say, for example, the Matt Moore situation against the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. The NFLPA and others have come out and criticized that, and now the Dolphins were not penalized, but they did get a warning that to follow protocol. But the interesting thing is this. The UNC the game was in Pittsburgh, so the UNC resided in the Pittsburgh area and undoubtedly was a Steelers fan. I find it hard to believe that that person would conspire with the Dolphins to do something wrong against Matt Moore or to help the team. The bottom line is that UNC, who was 2 feet away from the exam the entire time, had no issue with what the Dolphins did. Why does the league or the PA have an issue? If they do, they should fire the UNC as not having done his job correctly. But just to do these penalties, I think it's PR rather than reality. Roger Goodell last year said that fines and penalties and loss of draft choices would now come to teams if their medical staffs don't follow the concussion protocols and what have you. And I kind of laughed at that. Not at Mr. Goodell. I respect him. But, it really, that rule, that new change, the threat of fines and penalties is not in any way, shape, or form going to change what a medical professional does. Medical professionals have always had huge penalties hanging over their head in terms of malpractice lawsuits. Loss of a guy's career worth $100 billion where it can ruin your family. There is no medical professional that is going to take a risk to help a team win and put his own family's life and his own livelihood in jeopardy. So the fact to think that a doctor or trainer is now going to fear a fine from the commissioner is ridiculous. It's already been there. Now, I don't mind the rule. If there is a rogue doctor or trainer out there, sure, fine them. The league should have penalties. Teams should lose draft choices if they're playing games with the concussion protocol. But I think it's more lip service than reality in terms of changing how doctors and trainers and medical professionals think.
He is Pro Football Doc out on Twitter. He is Dr. David Chow. 17 years on the sidelines as an orthopedist with the San Diego Chargers, now with SiriusXM as well as Real Football TV. No one does it better during game. You're going to sort of into the quiet time, but this is really the loud time if you were a team physician, right? Because the Indianapolis Combines, I go every year. Everybody sees guys running around in their gym shorts. It's really a doctor and a medical, display for pinching and prodding and poking and testing these players for all sorts of baseline issues, right?
Well, first of all, in football, there is no off season. That goes through medical, too. The busiest part of the year is the end of the season. That's where the majority of the surgeries and cleanups and get healthy stuff is. And then as soon as you're done with that, you're going right into the combine, the draft process, and free agent. There's also free agent signing, physical. So you see the doctor on the sideline, but that's only a very small part of the job. A big part of the job is the player evaluation and player health throughout the year, and it is indeed a full-time job. And no question at the combines, and I've been to 20 of them like yourself, and that medical is the most important part of the combine. Instead of the quote underwear Olympics, it's really become the medical exam table and perhaps interview table sessions that are what are most important, because everyone seems to be a big trend to move towards the pro day workouts only and not working out at combines anyway. So medical is the big issue.
Doc, we had a big situation here 3 weeks ago, and, I don't know if you ever came across Zach Orr, the linebacker from the Ravens, one of the most likable people we've ever had in a purple uniform, had him out, he was coming into his own, led the team in tackles this year, and lo and behold, the word leaks to me about a week before it leaked to the rest of the world that his career was over, that they found this neck issue. How is that not found 3 years ago, 4 years ago at a combine? Or how do you play a couple of years in a league, running around on special teams before something like this gets diagnosed?
Well, it can happen easily, and how it happens here is, first of all, he never had any symptoms related to his neck, so there was no reason to look into it, and you don't go x-raying and MRIing body parts that don't have symptoms. Secondly, I don't believe he was at combine, so I don't think he went through some of the poking and prodding going in. And in this case, I think the young man is very lucky. By all accounts, he's a great kid, and obviously had come into his own. In some ways, it's very disappointing, but I look at it as a very happy time. I think a potential disaster was avoided. He had a congenital anomaly up high in his neck, and if he were to have gotten hit the wrong way, it could have meant paralysis and or death. And I think it should be celebrated that he had a great but limited career, and that he can move on to the rest of his life and do so safely for himself and for his family. So I'd say good job by the Ravens that once he had some sort of stinger or neck issue, they looked into it fully, and that's how they ended up discovering it.
Well, look, I'm going to bug you a little more often, but before I do, because we'll have occurring and recurring issues here. It is the NFL, Doc. But you mentioned North Dallas 40. Dude, that's my happy spot right there, right? I mean, do you have a favorite scene in North Dallas 40? I think peeing in the cold tub was kind of an interesting scene, but I thought the whole portrayal of what football allegedly was like in the 1960s was fascinating. I guess for a guy like you to go back and watch it, there's some great humor in that, but I hope we've transcended some of that, right?
Well, yeah, that clearly is overstated, and even some of the current movies that are out there about football and that involve team doctors, and even if you look at that Draft Day movie that was out recently and how sensationalized it was, I look at it this way, as a physician, there's a lot of even medical shows, or as a cop, there's Hill Street Blues and a lot of policeman shows, and basically what I've always felt with the medical shows is true with football. You take a perhaps 20-year career, sensationalize it, and compress it into a 1-hour episode. That's essentially what it is. There are some funny and interesting things that happen, but for a movie to get made or a TV show to get made, it gets sensationalized, and it's really not that way.
Well, in the case of us last week, I've been doing 21 years, I've been on Radio Row from the beginning. And last week, there were more people coming around with cannabis, weed, CBD, baseline testing, with the lawsuits going on in the league. Every witch doctor, I say, is rushing, to the edge. I don't know what to believe and what not to believe. I do know it's a violent game. I do know, the results of that with things like Gleason and concussion, and looking back on, every horrific Darryl Stingley thing that's happened over the last 40 years. I know everyone's hoping those things don't happen, but the long-term, implications of playing this game for long periods of time, and Junior Seau, who I know you were very close with, I'm always welcoming to those new ideas, even though I'm not smart enough to figure out whether they're selling me snake oil or whether they're selling me something legitimate.
Well, I think that's very true. Unfortunately, right now in medicine, there's way more we don't know about concussions and CTE than what we do know. We're really in our infancy. Think of it this way. In the 1950s, every knee injury was a knee sprain. Whether you tore your ACL, injured your meniscus, had a bone bruise, or bursitis, it was all called a knee sprain. Think about what we do today. You get hit, and you see momentary stars, and it's called a concussion. You get hit, and you have a seizure, or you're unconscious for 10 minutes and you have symptoms for 3 months, and that's called a concussion. It can't be the same injury, right? We get it. It's some sort of head trauma. But right now, concussions are not very specific. One day, hopefully, we'll get to the point where we can have concussions, and there'll be categorizations. Let's say, for example, a temporal lobe 2B concussion that's treated a certain way, an occipital lobe 3C concussion that's very dangerous, perhaps, and, you need these precautions and treatment. We're nowhere near where we need to be yet right now. It takes a lot of research and science. But, you take a look at the concussion movie. I mean, the whole premise of that movie was false. The premise was that this one Nigerian doctor discovered CTE. Look, CTE was discovered in the 1920s in boxers. It wasn't discovered in Mike Webster in Pittsburgh. So there's sort of a runaway media thing for this. Now, I'm not against all the attention that media has brought. That hopefully drives some money, drives research, and drives people to try and find the right solution. But you're right, we need to stay away from the snake oil salesperson. For example, there was one outfit that was claiming they could detect CTE in the living. This was a couple years ago, and the FDA put a ban on them and said you can no longer say that because it's not true. So there's all these things that happen, and you're right, you need to look at it all with a critical eye.
Hey, we'll be staying in touch with you. It really was nice to meet you. You're a great follow on Twitter. I would highly recommend anybody out there in the injury space, especially on game days. You're a pretty busy guy out there, the Mike Pereira of injuries in the NFL. Doc, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you making a little time.
Thanks, Nestor.
We'll be following him. He is Pro Football Doc out on Twitter. He is Dr. David Chow, MD. 17 years on the sidelines with the San Diego Chargers, now with Sirius XM Sports as well as Real Football TV. And he's just a fantastic follow. Tens of thousands do. You should as well at profootball.com. Doc. And there he goes, Dr. David Chow. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month, even in 2017, $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. There's a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Any breaking news while I'm gone, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home as well. Luke's on the job with the Terps. Ed's on the job with the Caps. And I'm a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'll be on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, traveling around the world and streaming all over the world on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Our London trip is on sale. We'd love to have you join us in September. All that information is under the Road Trips tab on the website. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.